oh, this is going to be really interesting. And the reason I know, we sell skincare. What does that have to do with sleep? It actually does have something to do with sleep. So as we were all sleeping last night, your skin is regenerating and it's your hormone levels are changing. And so a lot happens when you sleep that's important. And so I want to hear more about like, well, how much sleep is enough sleep? Because I'm kind of one of those, I'm an early riser. In fact, it's funny because I'm in California, Carrie is in Maine. And so sometimes I will contact her when I'm up at 4. She's like, oh yeah, you're up now, aren't you? It's 7:00 over here. And that's like that's my best time. My time is like, I can get up, wake up at 4 and I'm good to go. But then that guilt sets in later, like, oh, am I sleeping enough? Am I not, am I doing stuff wrong if I'm not getting my 8 hours? And so some of the podcasts that I heard you on, Molly, helped me kind of assess all of that. And we're going to put some of those in. And well, I'll wait on that one. Another one that you and I talked about a little bit of, of that has to do a lot with, and I don't know if it's all females in the room, but our bodies are made differently. And so it just, the whole sleep thing is going to be very, very different. So not only your circadian rhythm is going to be different, but you've got your monthly cycles and so on. That's all around that. But just a little bit, and I'm going to let Molly tell her story, but as someone who has, let's say you've suffered from chronic sleep deprivation, you traveled a lot. I don't know if you still do as much travel as you have in the past, but then you're dealing with jet lag. And the turning point for you was almost having an anxiety attack when you're at the Coliseum in Rome. And that's a few days of sleep deprivation. So I want to hear that story. And I will also put the podcast link to your podcast because I really encourage you all to go and listen to all the different topics, because she is definitely one who goes out and finds answers, and lots of technology, lots of natural methods. You don't have to just go get some kind of prescription to get to sleep. So she's going to help you navigate all of that. So, but if anybody has questions as they go, like, oh, well, please talk about this, put it in the chat. And as we go, we'll get those answered too. So we'll go for a good 20 minutes and then answer some questions. And then we'll wrap up with that. But Molly's got a lot of good stuff going on. So I'm going to let you take over with how you got into this.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And one, I acknowledge you guys for doing, listening to some of the podcasts beforehand, clearly dedicated to improving your own sleep and, the community's sleep. So really amazing and happy to be here. So a couple things. One, my backstory, I think, is helpful to hear because it gives some context to why I'm, so obsessed with the topic of sleep and so passionate on this topic. And from a perspective that it wasn't always working. So what it's kind of looked like is breaks down into 3 parts. So for the better part of my life, and including, really childhood, adolescence, college, early 20s, all that, I had a real fixed way of relating to my sleep. I had it that there's a lot of labels for me. It's in my genes. I'm a short sleeper. I'm an extreme night owl. All of these sort of ways of being and that related to that. I'm just going to need to survive this situation for myself and make it work. But I don't sleep the best. It's infrequent. It's all over the place. And that's how it was for me for many, many years. And then as a serial entrepreneur in Manhattan, burning the candle at both ends, as years went by, I started getting more extreme with my habits and behaviors. There'd be times when I'm going to bed as the sun is rising, but at the same time, I'm justified and I'm righteous about it. And I say, well, I make my own hours, so I'll just sleep in later, not a big deal. I'm more creative at night and would have all of these, narratives. So things kept going on that way, and I did not catch along the way a number of signs that retroactively or in hindsight could have signaled that something was not working. And some of those were that I got shingles in my 20s. I had the beginnings of an ulcer. I was just getting more and more anxious as time progressed. And so a lot of things that were that I just didn't hear the knockings of. And it wasn't until I went through my own period of insomnia while traveling internationally My fiance and I, also an entrepreneur, we decided to do, if anyone knows Tim Ferriss, or like the 4-hour work week. Oh, we're going to, put all our stuff in storage, go travel the world, one-way ticket. And at the time, our businesses were not ready for that. And the stress, the level of stress, the responsibility, employees, all the things, how that all kind of coalesced or came to a head was through this inability to sleep. And so for me, it was just days and days paired with the jet lag and what have you. And I really thought I was losing my mind. And it was really just a scary and a lack of empowerment, certainly a lack of empowerment, but also just a sense that in that some of those moments that you spoke to in Rome, just feeling like I am at the rock bottom, because what happened there was I was basically going through this tour, and if you picture the Coliseum and this whole group, you're with a whole group of people and you're just quietly listening. And I am like on day 3 of basically no sleep and freaking out, and I got to get out of here. And my other family was in, so it was also doubly embarrassing because, all these people that I know are there. So I have to bolt. And that moment paired with when I went to the doctors in Croatia with Google Translate and left with their version of Ambien, some of those moments were like, okay, I got to get this figured out. So from that place, then I went down the rabbit hole to really understand this mechanism around sleep. And through really understanding this whole concept of chronobiology and circadian rhythms, was fascinated, was able to restore my sleep. But this took some time. We literally had to come back to America to really handle this whole thing, because it just could not continue on. We tried for weeks and months, and it just wasn't working. It still wasn't sleeping. So I had to come back to America to really handle this. And so to say that I was connected and had skin in the game on this topic was very, very real. And on the other side of that, then getting this area handled, once this was back to level of homeostasis and even surpassing homeostasis, because I shared that my sleep wasn't that great before. And now it's like, at that point, then it was really, really working. So from that place, I could not stop talking about it. I started working with people just really organically that were struggling with their sleep. And then it grew to this whole thing. So now we've got, the weekly podcast, weekly newsletters, we've got online courses, one-on-one, small groups. And now we're even in hotels. We're in Cipriani's in New York City. We work with poker players. We work with UFC fighters. We work with high performance individuals. So this whole world got created out of really my rock bottom moment. And so that's part of the reason I'm really excited to share more about this area, because it can absolutely hold the keys to transforming so much in your life.
So one question about that, since you're working with all kinds of different people in different backgrounds, is there a common thread among those, or do you see something where it's if you fit this kind of lifestyle, you have this type of sleep problem? Do you see anything that's kind of in common that is across the board?
Yeah, really good question. It just so happens that my demographic that I am working with largely are people that can make their own hours. And by virtue of that, it's both this kind of blessing and a curse, because now a lot of their habits are all over the place, or through that flexibility, then some problems can arise. And they tend to skew kind of work heavy or have that lack of those clear boundaries. And that is kind of a snowballing effect of that inconsistency around a lot of these schedules. So it does seem to be a really common one. And then other two groups seem to be acute issues where now we've reached this point where I'm not sleeping, or it's really a struggle. I'm ready to make a change. And there's that group. And then there's also almost more like the biohacker group that is looking to, they're in this tech conversation. They're measuring lots of things about their biology, and they want to up level things. So those are kind of some of the two different distinct groups. But I would also say that across all of these, there is the basics of the kind of the mindset and the behavioral side is a big element there. So many of them across the board might believe that intrinsically something is wrong with them, so they can't get that type of sleep, no matter where they are on the spectrum. And so some of that is addressing that and then bringing in some of these behavioral change elements that relate to chronobiology and the kind of the timing of things to kind of break through that narrative.
So what would be like the first step then, if you've got
Yeah.
someone like this coming? Well, what do you look at first, or does it really depend on the person?
Yeah, great question. So when someone's coming in, we do kind of a full scale assessment to look at three things. So we call this sleep tripod. So we're looking at their psychology, physiology, and environment. And so out of those things, in some examples, of course, the psychology, we briefly touched on that. Is there something acute happening? Is there something, are they getting a divorce? Was there death in the family? Or was this chronic stressors that have been around for decades and now it's just, kind of culminating? So looking at the psychological aspect of things through a number of modalities, then from the physiological aspect of things, if there's, we were speaking about certainly different stages of menopause or perimenopause. So something from a physiological perspective, they might be dealing with, thyroid issues. They might be dealing with glucose instability, different things of that nature. So looking at that physiological aspect as well as things like sleep apnea and more anatomical issues that might be at play and really impacting their sleep and how to navigate that. Then environment. And this one, it's not just like your sleep environment where you're sleeping at night, but also your environment, like your surrounding of how you're running your day from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, because that also plays a huge, huge role in our results with our sleep. And that gets into kind of the sunlight exposure, darkness exposure, some of the things that are in our environment, so we can get more nuanced about that. But those three things are some of the top things that we're going through that assessment, seeing what we're dealing with right now. What is our baseline? If they're tracking, we're looking at some of the baseline numbers that they've got going on right now. And then from there, then we're moving into that circadian rhythm entrainment framework that we can speak about too.
Well, that's a whole science. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So when you say tracking, how do you do that? Like what kinds of or what exactly are you tracking when you're doing that?
Okay, so right now we lean into a couple things. Every client that we're working with is wearing the Oura Ring, OURA, and so, but there's also many different sleep trackers, consumer grade, and then there's also prescription. So we do have access to different types of prescription options. So like sleep image is one that we can look at that can have more of a diagnostic element for sleep apnea, but also sleep quality, which is really exciting. And then there's different types of trackers that we can have people sleep with on to get more nuanced on the sleep apnea topic. So there's that group. And then, but for consumer trackers, then in addition to Aura, there's also a lot of people wearing Whoop, BioStrap, Apple Watch, Dream headbands, Muse headbands, all of these different trackers. And the reason we're looking at that is truly so that it's almost an automated sleep diary, which used to be the suggestion and still can be if you're, more opposed to tech. But there's still going to be a lot of things that can often come out that we might not have been privy to in just a sleep diary. A sleep diary is still helpful because it brings about that awareness, the same way food tracking or any like kind of awareness techniques will be great. But with this, a couple of things that we really like to look at is heart rate variability, so HRV, and that gives us more an objective standpoint on stressors. So stress, and this is a big topic, you could spend a whole segment just on HRV, but that can give us some insight into how the body is dealing with stress. Are we dipping below our established baseline? Our heart rate arcs throughout the course of the night, our body temperature, our respiratory rate, and then things about what are our habits? What time are we going to bed? What time are we waking up? How many wake ups throughout the course of the night? Are things deviating at certain times of the week? So pattern spotting is really what we're looking to do to see, are you creating your own social jet lag, it's known as. So, you didn't go anywhere, but you've created your own type of jet lag because you tend to be really consistent around 4 to 5 days out of the week. And then you really skew those other remaining days. So things like that are what we're looking to kind of get up under.
Wow. Okay. And I kind of want to hear from the people everyone in the group. So And maybe Molly, help me come up with a range of, if you were to try to get people to talk about like how intense their sleep issues are on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you put that 1 and what would you put that 10? Do you have like a little bit of a range?
Yeah. So, to kind of get a sense of the, how committed we want to be or how bad things are, not
Yeah.
bad, but okay. So I would say there's multiple sort of things that we'd want to look at. So one, we want to look at the regularity. So our goal is to have the consistency across the board. And so if people, consistency of bedtime and awake time, and if we're having a lot of skewing on that, then that would definitely be something on the slider that might put us onto the lower side of things. Or there's some people that's not what's going on for them. They're consistent. So that's not it. It's more that the wake ups are occurring and they're dealing with how, like whether anxious kind of response to that, frustration, or they're augmenting their total sleep time. Like they're staying in bed longer to try to make up for that. So that would be another one that we might put on the lower side of that spectrum if they're dealing with that. Then there's other people that even will say, listen, I think I'm fine. My wife is having me do this. But I'm going through this process. Things are okay. But then we look at their stats and there's tons of micro wake ups. They're snoring throughout the course of the night. Lots of signs that could indicate sleep apnea or, going into this kind of obstructive breathing at the very least. So that would put us onto it on another scale. Then there's also people that there might be some of this difficulty of falling asleep. So it's the sleep onset. They're consistent. They always wake up at the same time, but it's the onset and the anxiety that comes about with that. So those are some of the very common ones, I would say. But then there also can be people that want to do some out of the box things where they want to almost do kind of like biphasic sleep, or they're having a lot of napping. And some of these can be red flags that something is not right with their sleep. So that's why it really does take a lot of diving in and for many of us too, that will just say, oh, my sleep's good, my sleep's bad, and kind of put these labels. It's so nuanced. And that's why we really stay on that sleep is a skill, because it's not as simplistic as what I think a lot of us might have thought it was. And certainly what I had, kind of related to it before I went down this path.
And for you, how gradual was that path, as far as like, was it more once you started traveling, or was it because before that it was already living in New York and kind of getting, the businesses going on?
So it ended up being, so it was 3 months abroad where trying to make it work, and it just was not working. And so literally coming back, then it still took another few months after that for it to really start to normalize. And, I went to different functional medicine doctors. We found some other health stuff. I had a parasite. I mean, my goodness, I had a lot of things going on. So certainly there was a lot of things that I needed to do. And that's part of what we really stand for, is that when our sleep isn't working, it's a really loud signal that there's something at play. And certainly I know with Carrie, we're talking about the root cause side of things. There's something there that we want to listen to and kind of peel back the layers. And so with that, I was actually afraid that I would never be able to travel again, because I thought, okay, well, now I'm going to have to be someone that has to have all these accoutrements, or am I going to have to take sleeping pills? What am I going to have to do? I can't, if I lose my luggage, or if you go to there's certain countries in the world that you can't even go with some of these, sleeping medications and all this sort of stuff. And that was my fear. I didn't want to go down that path. And yet at the same time, I was desperate. And so with that, so that whole process took a good 4 to 5 months to kind of start to normalize. And then it just sent me down the rabbit hole. And so it's really changed everything since. So I'm actually very, very grateful for that whole period.
And you're able to, like, if you were to leave tomorrow and go to Europe or something, you're able to go and it would be fine.
Yes. So the triumph ended up being that then we ended up traveling for 3 years after that. And so we went back and forth between Southeast Asia and New York City. And we travel a lot now. I mean, even with the lockdown, surprisingly, we're still able to kind of get out and about quite a lot. So our whole lives really transformed. And it was such an empowering thing to actually naturally conquer this area. And even if anyone's listening saying, well, this is more extreme than what I'm dealing with, or wherever you are in this conversation, the aim is, the takeaway is that there's always an area that we can up level in this realm of sleep, because I really believe that it's the foundational piece of the pyramid for health and wellness, and by which then we can layer on nutrition and exercise and all those things. Of course, there's a bi-directional relationship, but if we don't handle this area and really also see that everything that we do for health and well-being will affect sleep. So it's something where we can I still am fascinated with, how can I further improve my sleep? I test it all the time. I do all kinds of different things. I've got lots of different products in my office, and I've got like stacks of different things that I'm testing, and, so it's a fun thing, I think, to explore.
And I want to let everybody know, actually, Carrie, if you could, I don't know if you've done it yet, but put the link to her podcast page, because I think that will already give people a lot of different direction to start with. So if you go click over to the podcast and then just scroll down, and if you're more into the tech, you want to see what kind of gadgets you can use, she's interviewed tons of people on that. Or if it's more the nutrition, if it's more hormonal, or you're not even sure, I think that probably pops up on all the different pages on your site where it asks those questions, and then you cater. Yeah. And by the way, Mollie, I just subscribed to your newsletter last week. So I got the first one on Monday. I'm like, oh, there's so much information here. I mean, you have done all of that work. So that's why I love to come find people like you who have already, because we're not all exactly struggling with the same exact problem. Right. But to just know that there are some other people who have done the research, you've tapped into all these different experts, and you're sharing what you've learned. And so just by going to your website, you see that there's a little assessment that you can take, and that will show you. And okay, wait, Chris had a question. Okay, Chris wants to know, would you consider sleeping with your mouth open a bad thing for your health? That's interesting. That's a good question.
Yes, Chris, that is a great question. Absolutely. That's such an important one for us to address. Because we're aiming to promote nasal breathing and mouth breathing. And if you don't know if you are mouth breathing or not, some signs of that can be waking up in the morning with dry mouth. Sometimes it can be headaches, reports of snoring. You can use a free app called Snore Lab that you can download, and it will actually give you kind of a score of how much you might have been snoring if it translates into snoring. But certainly even just mouth breathing alone will affect the quality of your sleep. So the more we can promote nasal breathing, the more that can help with nitric oxide production, which we really want to cultivate. And so some takeaways with that is that, one, you can train for this throughout the course of the day and start to kind of train your body, even when you're working out, except maybe, total max output workouts. But for the majority of your workouts, how can you mouth breathe? How can you nasal breathe and close the mouth? Very important. And so you can even get mouth tape if anyone is playing with that. So very affordable kind of thing. You can get 3M tape if you so choose. Or there's also products on the market on Amazon and what have you, Somnifix, Breathe Well, Via Tape, all kinds of different ones that you can bring in, and that will tape your mouth so that it will kind of force nasal breathing, but you don't need to be afraid of it or anything. The body can still breathe perfectly fine. And I should put some asterisks. If you are someone that says, no, my nose is often stuffed, or that's not going to work for me, then we do want to we have more reason to work on that throughout the course of the day, because your nose can begin to adapt to this change over time and even kind of widen over time. And there are even products like intake breathing is one that has magnets that will expand your nose if you are dealing with issues there. And surprising. So for some people, you'll really see measurable changes if you are tracking to see your respiratory rate go down. That's really our goal. Because when you're having to breathe too many times per minute throughout the course of your sleep, it's a lot of exertion for the body that's unnecessary and kind of taking away from our main goal, which is, restoration throughout the course of the night. So attacking that breathing side of things is going to be really big. Even people that are have sleep apnea, they, depending on the modalities that they're using, they might bring in mouth taping on top of their treatments for sleep apnea, to further enhance their results with their sleep.
So since you brought up, can you say anything on sleeping with a snorer? How do you?
Yes. Sleeping with a snorer is a big one. So one, I would say that you definitely want to get them checked for sleep apnea for them and you, because it's such a underdiagnosed thing and can just be so, that is one of the things, it's one of the easiest ways for me to see people have like life-changing results where the sky is, clearer and the clouds part. And then suddenly it's just a whole new experience because they are getting a level of restorative sleep that they weren't getting before. So definitely getting checked for sleep apnea. There's even companies like Lofta in the States, and others that will, for pretty affordable rates, you can just go to their site and they'll send you an at-home test. So then you can virtually, kind of go over the results and what have you. Lots of things like that are popping up, and there will be even more. Empower Sleep is another one that also uses sleep image, like I was sharing. So there's lots of those that can address that. And if it's not sleep apnea, you can test out with the mouth tape. There's also different gadgets. There's one called Motion Pillow that will kind of adjust the head at different points when there's registration of breathing. So then it kind of moves them. At snorelab.com, no affiliation with them, but they have a whole kind of library that's just convenient to see of different options that the snorer can do. And for free, you can even, a lot of it comes from back sleeping often. So once you're onto your back, it seems to, just anatomically, it can kind of put our mouth agape and then we're snoring more. So you can even, people will make like tennis ball backpacks. So you just put on a backpack while you sleep to train yourself temporarily, to not go on your back, and you fill it with tennis balls or, whatever you have on hand. And through that, then over time, you train yourself to be, ideally a side sleeper in that conversation, to see if we can mitigate some of those. But if you are then stuck next to a snorer, what do you do right now in the immediacy? Then certainly we can bring in, there's sleep phones is kind of a headband type thing that will give you some white noise, to kind of block that out. White noise machines, all of those act as like a wall of kind of sound. And, certainly there are, earplugs and what have you. But those can be some steps to take. And there are entire books being written about the concept of sleep divorces right now, that can get into literally going in and creating another room if there are problems with your significant other that's going to impact your sleep night after night, schedules.
All right, that's just
movement.
Too funny.
Yeah, I know.
I make my husband wear his CPAP every night because his snoring is so loud without it that I could be sleeping on my good ear and have plugs in. Yes. And the mattress will still be shaking. Yeah. So okay. I'm like, it's just non-negotiable. Like you need to wear that.
Okay. Yes. Good. Well, I'm glad that you guys are having conversation around this. Some people just kind of begin to settle for this, or, lots of different things happen. But we really want to get at the source of this, and do know that there's lots of new treatments that are coming out for sleep apnea. If you are with someone, or if you yourself have sleep apnea, one new kind of exciting one is literally called Excite OSA. And that one is a daytime treatment. It is approved right now with clinical trials around mild sleep apnea and snoring. And then they're in the process of studies for moderate and severe. And this one is a daytime kind of treatment. And so it's almost like a TENS unit for your tongue, kind of like working out the tongue. Like, you work out a bicep, you work out the muscles there. And that seems to be really helpful for that topic. There's also laser treatments, different types of masks now. So there's lots that you can do too, if it was a while ago that you were diagnosed or someone.
Okay. Good. Can you tell us like a couple tips on how to set up your bedroom for the best sleep environment? Like what kinds of, maybe you don't have serious issues, but just to get a good night's sleep, what's the best way? Or even for your children, because I know that would probably be a big one. If we can train them when they're young to have certain things in place, they won't develop bad habits later.
Yes. Okay. So one thing that I think will help facilitate this answer is a bit of information about that conversation of circadian rhythm entrainment, because it really brings all of this together and helps make us understand why what we do in the night and setting up that environment is so important. So basically, this framework, I think if all of us were bringing this in, could be life-changing. And basically what it is, you can open up any chronobiology textbook, which chronobiology is really the science of time and how it affects our biology. And it's a relatively new science in the realm of sciences. So it hasn't quite hit a lot of the mainstream topics, although it has been out for decades. But it's really a fascinating area. So you open up any chronobiology textbook, you will find circadian rhythm entrainment. It's this process of how we can, by virtue of our environment and behaviors, entrain to strengthen our circadian rhythm. So you can think of our circadian rhythm as really being on a spectrum. So there's really on the weak side or the strong side. And many of us might hang out more on the weak side. So we're looking to see how can we kind of by virtue of our environment and behaviors, move ourselves over to that strong side. So the good news is that in order to do that, there are things called Zeitgebers, which really means time givers. And these time givers that will affect our circadian rhythm. And there's kind of a top down, most important list there. So the top most powerful time giver that there is in this conversation is light. And of course, on the flip side of that is darkness. So that gets into some of the environment of our sleep. But I think this also, by having this lens of a kind of circadian centric lens, then what we get to do is flip instead of just focusing on the nights. Because like when I was failing at trying to sleep, I was going into battle every night, and I would have like all my things and my books and my, eye mask and like lavender, whatever the heck I would be doing to try to make this force really this thing to happen. And as we all know, with like forcing sleep, that's not a good thing often. So instead, this flips things on its head and has us look at what are we doing when we first wake up in the morning. Very first thing when we open our eyes, what does our environment look like there? Because this actually plays a huge role, one of the most powerful roles in that kind of setting of our circadian rhythm, so that we'll actually be tired at night when we finally go into that dark room. So if you get nothing out of what I'm saying, because I know we're talking about a lot of things and gadgets and but if you get nothing, this is a free thing you can do, which is to get yourself outside every single morning for an extended period of time. And it does depend where you are on the globe, northern latitude locations. Instead of saying, well, I'm not in this conversation because, it gets dark and it's not as powerful in the winter. It actually is a flip side. You actually want to be outside longer to make up for the weaker sun. Even if it's cold therapy, embracement, I guess you could say. And so we're getting ourselves outside first thing in the morning, because that bright shot of sunlight is called sunlight anchoring. And so by anchoring that sunlight exposure, that tells the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is the master clock in our body that basically acts as the conductor to these peripheral clocks, which are in virtually every cell and organ in our body. And from that place, that sets this rhythm. And then there's a real direct correlation with the time that you got that bright light exposure, that you're going to actually get tired later in the evening. So you can expect it to be around 16 hours or so later, depends on the person, but it's ballpark. But so that you know that there's a real cause and effect, that if you don't get out there, maybe some people don't get out there at all, but if you don't get out there till later, you can anticipate that you will not get tired until later on in the evening as a result of that timing, because it's biologically hardwired for thousands and thousands of years, because we used to live outside in the rhythms of nature. So if you just start with that, Then you'll also remember, now that you've anchored the first part of your day with that sunlight, now post sunset, you want to do everything possible to dim your lights as much as we can. There's great studies out of NASA looking at actually candlelight output, so very low lux output, that will actually help produce natural internal melatonin by virtue of just the presence of dimness, because melatonin is known as a vampire hormone. So its presence is really augmented through darkness. So if you are looking to improve your own natural sources of that, get really friendly with the dark. So having more of a dim environment in the evening, candle, melatonin, I've got like red lights over here. Just really make your space look kind of wacky in the evenings. But then once you get, so this is finally getting to your question about the bedroom environment, that is where you actually ensure that it's as dark as humanly possible, cave-like. And then if you need to certainly move around or with kids or what have you, getting ideally red motion lights, you can get these pretty affordably on Amazon. And so different types of lighting that are not going to disrupt that melatonin production, even, a short, bright, kind of hit of light. So even opening up your kind of refrigerator or what have you, some of those things can confuse the body and send those confusing signals, weakening that circadian rhythm, and can set you back on that process that we're trying to wind down. So really, really using that light topic. And then the last thing I'll say on circadian rhythm entrainment, we've address that the most important is light, and the flip side of that, of course, darkness. And then the second most important rung is temperature. So that feeds into what should that bedroom look like. We want it to be really, really cooler than most people are doing. So Sleep Foundation recommends between 60 and 67 degrees. But so you're aiming to make sure it's like that, but also remembering, even if you put the space that temperature, our beds are very foreign to how we used to sleep, like on the ground, which is kind of how they used to be, how we used to sleep for thousands of years, which would be very cool. But now we're sleeping in these kind of insulated foam-like environments, so it can heat us up, right? So we want to then support the cooling of that. I definitely am a big fan of cooling mattress pads, because it actually, even though it sounds so extra or, next level, it actually is more akin to how we used to sleep in the past. And you'll see most people will often see measurable changes in their sleep stats when they bring in things like this. So light, darkness, temperature, and we can also share there's other things that influence your body temperature that are really fascinating too.
That is amazing. Thank you. That was a lot of information. And we have about a minute or two left. So if anybody has questions, you can ask just real quick. And then in the meantime, definitely go to what your website is, sleepisaskill.com, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Sleep is a skill. You'll get so much information. I highly, highly recommend that you get on Mollie's newsletter list. And she's going to start a group. Actually, you should tell me more about that. I just heard about that. So what is it that you're going to start? And in the meantime, we'll look at the questions.
Oh, sure. Yes. So we're launching for that on April 11th. And so the one requirement for that is to have an Oura ring or to have just purchased an Oura ring. Again, no affiliation, but just as a kind of a way to have that observer effect or the Hawthorne effect, where you know that other people are going to be aware of your stats, and it tends to have us, change our behavior. If at the end of this call, we're all going to look at each other's sleep, results, and not in a kind of intense way, instead in a kind of get a sense that all of us will have different periods of highs and lows. And there's so much that we can do about it, kind of to get back in the driver's seat.
Okay. And let me end with this one question from Mary. I feel like I do all the good sleep hygiene tricks I've heard, but I still only have about 1 hour of REM, 1 hour of deep sleep, and nearly 1 hour of being awake at night, or that's what my tracker says. I can't seem to up my sleep score too much. Do you have a suggestion? My light sleep is always about 5 hours. And is this normal?
Yes. Okay. So so I will call out that even though we talk about a lot of these trackers and how they can be so helpful, one call out is that the least accurate information on the hand and wrist-based trackers are the sleep stage classifications. So they excel in certain areas. They excel in, are you asleep or are you awake? Your heart rate, your respiratory rate, your HRV, your body temperature, all those things, they really seem to size up well. and the sleep stages are not the best. You can, within that specific tracker, track your trends. Try not to get too crazy about day to day, and remembering that fact that they're not the most accurate in that call out. But I would say, even though that breakdown of 1 hour REM and 1 hour deep sleep, I do have clients that would still kill for those numbers. And so definitely still know that there's some positives there. And I hear you when you have the 1 hour of awake time. And so those are things that we want to look at too, of how many, because waking up throughout the course of the night is normal, and how many times are we waking up, and for how long are we awake? And if it's over, the 10, 15 minutes or so for that wake up, then we want to start looking at what might be at the source of that. What is the timing for that? What's getting affected? What of those sleep stages? So there are a ton of things that we can do. So one, even just addressing wake ups, there are a rundown, but one, that regularity topic, of course, we discussed. That's a big one, ensuring that even if you go to bed late, that you still maintain that same wake up time around 365 days a year is our kind of goal. Plus or minus 30 minutes on either side is what we're aiming for. But so that's the top, very common one that we can kind of deviate from. Then blood sugar regulation is a really common one too. We've had people wearing continuous glucose monitors and seeing that they're dropping their blood sugar throughout the course of the night, and then having wake ups. And not only are they waking up, but they're the type of wake ups that now they're awake and seems to have more of that kind of cortisol, adrenaline response. So taking a look at that. Then, of course, so meal timing, and I know we're wrapping up on time, but this is a fascinating one. A recommendation would be the Circadian Code book by Dr. Sachin Panda, because that's looking at the timing of your food. Maybe you say, oh, no, my blood sugar is fine. But what time are you eating those? And you want to look at the first bite of food, last bite of food, because that even includes little snacks and what have you, because that all kind of turns on the kitchen of your stomach. And that sends a signal of what time it's likely to be. And that seems to affect our circadian rhythm and cause either more difficulty falling asleep or more wake ups throughout the course of the night. So that can be a really common one. And then, of course, there's different prescriptions that we might be taking, hormonal imbalances. We do have some people wearing the LIEF, LIEF, which is a continuous HRV, heart rate variability tracker. And that's a really good way to kind of get a gauge of your stress levels throughout the course of the day. And it does take some support because, and they have coaches on there and what have you, because you have to discern through stressors between just basic digestion or stressors of actually mental stress throughout the course of the day and other things that might be at play, food allergies. And then we also do have often people work with functional medicine doctors to ensure that there's not very real things that might be happening in the body that could be flaring up some of these results.
Great. Okay, Mary, you've got your homework now.
And very happy to, connect more on our website, sleepisaskill.com. We have a little kind of sleep bot on the corner. So you can also feel free to check in there and kind of put any other call outs or, questions or what have you. We aim to really make this kind of like a community and then certainly get yourself on our weekly newsletter, because on there we do have a lot of different, kind of tips and tricks and experiments and different things that people are doing in studies and what have you.
So
Yeah.
Mollie, wrapping up, do you have any quick tips for us going into the time change?
Yes, I do. Yes. So for this adjustment, one, please be a stand that we work from a legislative perspective to abolish this process, because it does a lot of damage to our health and well-being. So stand for that. And then in absence, in lieu of that changing, then we want to just incrementally, and this is the same way we'd approach, even if we're going to be traveling and changing a time zone or what have you, we'd be incrementally changing our habits in lead up for that. So for us, we want to go to bed a little bit earlier each night until we get to March 13th, when then the times will change. And, if some people might kind of poo-poo that it's only an hour, it is really gives a testament to the fact that Even being slightly off of our circadian rhythm can really have, deleterious effects. And we'll see so many people with uptick in heart attack rates, car accidents, a number of things that really are ill affecting our society as a result of just that 1 hour. So the more you can kind of prep for that, and even if you have kids, kind of helping to support them on that process, but just a few minutes each night to kind of ease yourself into that can often be really helpful. But with that, that's where you want to pull in some of the circadian rhythm entrainment elements. So you'd want to end your meal timing just a little bit earlier each night. You'd want to also kind of dim the lights a little bit earlier each night. All of these things so that it's starting to tell the body the cues of what, yes, exactly. See? And there's a lot of things too, from like blue blockers, as we don't want to have that kind of save the day, but that can be helpful, if you're watching TV or what have you, and try to kind of mitigate some of the blue and green light. But ultimately we want to create an environment where it tells the body what time and what we want it to be doing when. So those would be some of those things. So moving back, our exercise timing, and just kind of really thinking some of these things through to help support that change.
Great. Thank you so much, Mollie. This is packed with information. I feel like we could have probably done 3 more sessions like this to get in deeper even, but would love to have you come back and nail some more topics for us like this. So yeah, you're getting good comments also praising this. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I hope my main intention, because I really am on a mission to transform this conversation on sleep from a place of the fact that I really believe that once we get into this conversation, it's so fascinating that it can hopefully pull us to actually, versus just the kind of tired old, sleep hygiene and have the lavender. I'm always hating on lavender, poor lavender. But instead of those tips that are great, and that there's so much more to this story. So I really hope that we can stand in this possibility, or even try on this idea that sleep really is a skill, hopefully coming at it from a blank canvas and being that student of this topic and this thing that we do a third of our life, that when we really get this reined in, it can just be such a superpower for, particularly in a society where it is really, really an epidemic of sleep deprivation and problems in this area. So if you can be someone that is really trains yourself and is knowledgeable on this, you can make a difference for yourself and for others.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing that, nail this part down, because it could unravel something else that you might be dealing with.
Yes.
Or you might also see that, okay, I'm more anxious about this than I need to be. I'm actually sleeping pretty well, because sometimes we just overthink things.
Yes.
Maybe it's not as bad as we think it's bad. And then like for me, when you said waking up, I wake up a lot through the night, like maybe 3 or 4 times, but I fall back asleep like that. So I could stress about the fact that I'm waking up, but knowing that I fall back asleep right away, maybe I don't need to worry so much about that.
Sure. Yes. And continuing to kind of audit and see, are things shifting? Like we see people with long COVID that suddenly things are changing with the amount of frequency wake ups or what have you. So point being that the more data you have on yourself and more awareness, then we can start to see, are things deviating from that? Or is this just something that's really okay and workable? And for the sleep anxiety piece, one suggestion I would give is the Sleep Book by Guy Meadows. And that's a great resource for people if they are starting to have some anxiety about their kind of performance, almost going into the realm of performance anxiety. And there's a lot of great resources there too.
And then also, I just want to, when you talk to, what is her name?
Oh, Elisa Vitti.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she has an app. I just downloaded it and I just bought her book too. But the app, the My Flow app. So for the ladies in the room, I highly recommend that. That app is just chock full of things that you can do so that you're looking at your whole picture, your whole entire month too. So when.
So helpful, because, just the last point to that is we talked a lot about circadian rhythm entrainment, and that is one rhythm that of our, biologically that we're dealing with. There are others. And the second really big one for any female that is going through this monthly cycle, still of menstruating age, is the infradian rhythm. And so that is happening around 28 or so days, basically about a month. And that's that rhythm that's monthly versus our daily circadian rhythm. So that is a whole other topic and something that you can really biohack, quote unquote. But she's a fantastic resource. She's our most listened to podcast episode. So definitely it could be a great place to start. And she's got fantastic information. That app is really going to help guide you through different parts of your cycle and how to change your behaviors to affect your results with your health and your sleep.
Yeah, that's a really good episode. That's episode 8. And the two of you even go deep into when to exercise, what type of exercise, just based on your cycle. So there's so much. There's so much. We got
so much. Yeah.
Thank you again. This will be on a replay. So for those in the room, please share it with other people. It will be on in a few days. And that's if you go to hardlotion.com/wellness. You can go see some of our future topics and go listen to the past topics. So very, very informative. And I so appreciate that you packed it in for us. So again, I hope everybody will get on Mollie's newsletter list. And if you know people having issues with sleep, problems with sleep, definitely now you have a resource that you can point people to. So thank you, Mollie, for coming on. And
thank you, my main sister.
Oh, my main sister. Yes. Oh, the two of you are fantastic. And thank you for opening up the floor to your great group here. And I really just appreciate the work that you all are doing and happy to be connected and looking forward to more.
Thank you. And now everybody knows how to deal with daylight savings. That is this weekend, in case anyone is not watching the calendar.
Exactly.
It's this weekend. So have a few days to get ready for it. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Thanks. See you, everybody.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you all.